Okay, thank you for tuning into the first episode of Level 7 Motorsports JTT, or Jesse's Tech Talks. So today, Keith's here with me. What's your Instagram name? LS Twin Turbos?
Yes.
And Twin Turbo?
It's LS underscore twin dot turbo, formerly known as. All right.
Anyways,
Yep.
start scene. So anyways, this is the first episode of Jesse's Tech Talks. Keith's here with me. We're going to dive into something that I've had a lot of messages, a lot of emails. We've had phone calls, a lot of conversation about chassis. Most of you guys that have questions are people who want to drive a C10. So this is going to be pertaining to C10 trucks specifically, and people who want to drive their trucks a lot and then maybe try out the autocross thing. And if you try out the autocross thing, a lot of people would like to be competitive. So that's why we're specifically focusing on chassis and some of the questions regarding chassis. What chassis, what options. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit today. So Keith's here to kind of pose some of the questions. You have a stock chassis with bolt-on suspension.
Yes, I do.
A lot of people have question about whether or not bolt-on suspension would be good enough in regard to how competitive they would be on the autocross, or even how good it would be on the street in normal driving to dinner, to work, stuff like that. So we're just going to fast forward right to the fact that you do need a chassis if you want to be competitive, and you want a truck that rides and drives and handles really good.
You can, like, my truck has top shelf bolt-on stuff, and I've went through and boxed in the frame to try to make it as close to a chassis as I can. And it's still obviously different when you get in a truck that has a chassis. And dollar for dollar, considering what I had put on and taken off and put on again, the money is not much different.
Yeah. So Keith has the top tier, top shelf of what you can buy for bolt-on suspension. So he's got the Detroit Speed, the Speed Max kit. So it's an entire front subframe that comes with rack and pinion steering, coilovers, brakes, 4-link. So it's the best you can get. So if your budget is a little tighter than chassis would allow, that's the best that you can probably do. Other than No Limit, Wide Ride, and their Fat Bar 4-link. That's the best you can do with bolt-on stuff for a stock chassis. So where this conversation starts to dive into why you would need a chassis, if you did buy what Keith has, or did buy No Limits, Wide Ride, and Fat Bar, you'd still need to make the frame strong. So you'd have to box the entire frame, add reinforcement to the middle of the frame, big center section.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. And if you're paying a shop to do that, by the time you factor in labor hours and powder coating the frame or any of that stuff, then you probably should have just jumped right to a full chassis. So we're going to talk about the manufacturers that are available for a full chassis for a C10. It'd be No Limit Engineering, their ProTech chassis. Brian Finch has the Apex Predator chassis. TCI has a full chassis now for at least 67 to 72 C10s that we know of. And then SpeedTech has a chassis that's kind of a universal truck chassis. Maybe now they have specific body mounts, but so those are the four manufacturers. They're all going to be basically the same as far as how rigid or how stiff the chassis is. They're all going to be boxed, heavy-duty frames.
So that's universal with all the frames. I mean,
they're all going to be.
Obviously, the body mounts are going to fit whatever truck you're putting on there.
Yeah, I think so. So the only one that I would say maybe on the body mounts is SpeedTech. I know that when a guy that we know from Texas bought a SpeedTech chassis for a square body, they didn't have body mounting solutions at that point.
Okay.
So the shop that did that truck had to build body mounts.
Sure.
or transfer body mounts from the stock frame. So there was a little bit of engineering and a little more work to get the body on that truck. But yeah, all the rest of them, all the body mounting's done. They are really, really heavy duty. There's no twist in the chassis. All the suspension does the work that it needs to do.
So you can, like, if I decided to go that way, I literally just take the body off my truck and bolt it onto the new one.
Yeah, in theory. Every manufacturer has, I'm not going to say fitment issues, but like we like to mock up trucks, that we put on chassis.
Okay.
There's still a piece that's made by man, it's
right.
it's something that's built, and there can be error. So we like to always order chassis without powder coat so that we can put the bodies on, make sure everything's dialed in and gapped just right before we make the decision to powder coat. But yeah, ultimately you should just be able to take your chassis, put your body on it, put the drivetrain in it, and go.
So how do you decide
when to buy a chassis?
Yeah, I mean everybody wants to be competitive, but you can autocross anything, mm-hmm. pay your fee and go out and drive. Yeah. But as far as how competitive do I want to be versus how much money do I want to spend to be competitive, and competitive to who? Competitive mm-hmm. to you or competitive to somebody else that's starting out brand new? Mm-hmm. Because that's the question that comes up often enough is, can I do this cheaply? Or, where, yeah, it's always about the money.
Yeah. So I don't want to say that money shouldn't be used to judge which one you should buy, or don't factor out one because it's more expensive than the other. But yeah, that's always going to be a factor. It would be best to just buy the chassis right away. If you know that you want to be competitive and you want to build a good vehicle. It stinks to do repetitive buying. You've done it. I've done it.
Yeah.
We've all been there and done that as far as bolting on suspension, realizing it's not good enough, changing how your 4-link setup is, So if you just go right to buying a chassis, I think you're going to forego a lot of learning curve. I went through 3 or 4 years of learning curve trying to redo and get better and better. You went through multiple iterations of suspension systems.
Right.
So there's a lot of learning curve. Let's say that you did have the budget, 4 or 5 years ago. It would have been the best decision for you to just buy a chassis years ago,
sure.
and put your truck on it. You would have been able to continue to move forward in your driving skill, and the truck's already good enough.
Because it's totally different driving my truck from what it was 2 or 3 years ago versus, driving a truck that comes on a chassis with the suspension and stuff. It's not going to be the same.
Right.
You can tell by riding in one that they're different.
Yeah, absolutely. And that it stinks to be a novice driver and you've got a truck that's set up not professionally either.
Sure.
So then you're kind of trying to drive around a truck that's not really set up well or have good geometry. So you're not really becoming much of a better driver either.
You're trying to wrangle the vehicle.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. If you were handed a vehicle that was completely capable, and then all you had to do was get your skill set up to par, you'd be fine.
Okay.
You wouldn't have to drive home after an event and say, oh, if I would have had better tires, or oh, if I had better brakes, or oh, if I had this fixed, I could have done better. So anyways, just jumping right to the chassis is what we're trying to talk about in this video. Like, what are the options? We've already decided that we need the chassis. So let's dive into, we know the 4 different brands. So maybe let's talk about what differentiates those 4 manufacturers. So TCI is a West Coast company. They're in California. I guess all 4 manufacturers are going to have an independent front suspension that's totally good. The roll centers are higher than factory geometry. All that stuff's the same. So then we just start talking about TCI is a West Coast company. Those truck chassis are built with torque arm rear suspension. And I think the only person that's going to have a chassis over here in the Midwest or East Coast would be Matt Keener.
Matt.
But those are an option. Nothing that we really deal with here much, just simply because of accessibility. But so those are definitely an option for West Coast customers.
Now he's bolt-on now, right?
He has their torque arm bolt-on system in the back and their front end. But from what I understand, he's going to be stepping up to a full chassis of theirs.
And he's competitive.
Super competitive. Yeah.
But now he's ready to
go further.
Okay.
Yep. So, and the entire world keeps like progressing in the gyro truck world keeps progressing, so a couple years ago, he was hard to beat.
Right.
He had 275s all the way around, like the best suspension you could buy, and he was hard to beat. And so now, like, everybody just kind of keeps stepping up, and so I'm happy to hear that he's moving forward with TCI.
Does this bolt-on stuff, can I change that over to, like Matt, to just buy a chassis? Does that work with everybody? If I bought No Limits bolt-on stuff, could I buy a chassis and put my stuff on it? Or is that different?
Well, the answer might be maybe, but it doesn't make sense financially, because there's still a lot of people that would want a stock chassis with those parts on it. So financially, it would be better off to just sell the entire rolling chassis.
Okay.
Take that money and put it into the other chassis.
And that's...
Look at Corey. Look at my
That's what I was
chassis.
going to say.
We both
you and Corey both did that.
Yeah, so Corey Ivy is Lemon Twist. He had a wide ride, and he had a trailing arm rear, but it was No Limits trailing arm rear. He had a raised rail in the back, and I think that chassis sold for $12,000. I think my last chassis, which was a stock chassis with all the good stuff, went for $12,000.
Sure.
Obviously, these all come with brakes and wheels and tires and gas tanks and all that stuff. But yeah, it'd be much easier to just take that money and put it back into an entire chassis.
That way, you're getting something that's already together.
Yeah,
take
absolutely.
Some of the do-it-yourself part out.
Yep.
Okay.
So moving through the manufacturers, the next one would be SpeedTech Engineering. SpeedTech trucks are built with torque arm rears also. So right. TCI and SpeedTech are both torque arm. Torque arm is what you would picture underneath a 3rd gen or 4th gen Camaro. They have tons of forward bite, tons of rear grip. And then moving into the manufacturer that I'm most familiar with and we do the most amount of business with is No Limit Engineering. Their ProTech chassis have been around for a long time and continue to progress and get better and better and better. So they offer the standard ride height chassis, which is more for street trucks. And then they offer what I have and a lot of people have now is the raised rail chassis. So the rails kick up in the back and they have a drop spindle in the front. So they set nice and low. So those right off the shelf are 4-link trucks.
Right.
And I think right now, No Limit Engineering is probably the only one that would offer an independent rear suspension option. And that's what the yellow and white truck has. It has a independent rear with C6 Corvette rear spindles, and mine has a quick change. You can get a quick change, or you can get a 9-inch third member. And then if we go to Brian Finch and the Apex Predator chassis, those chassis have also 4 links. So if you're not familiar with the Apex Predator chassis from Brian Finch, they're pretty new to the market, pretty new to our industry. They're a recreated factory frame rail, aftermarket rail that has a DSE front suspension, and it's got a DSE Quadrolink in the rear. They sit super low, they're super competitive, they handle well. So they're another top tier player as far as drivability and handling goes. All these trucks can fit at least a 315, if not a 335 wide tire all the way around. And all these trucks are going to handle and drive really, really well. What's the next question?
If I decided that I was going to do that, what's the best way for me to decide who I want to go with? And if they were all priced the same, let's just take the money out of the equation. How do I decide which company I want to go? Do I want the trailing arm or the 4-link or which particular brand? Do I need to talk to somebody that has it? Do I need to talk to somebody that builds them? Do I need to talk straight to the manufacturer? What's
all that?
all that.
all that. So do plenty of market research. Talk to the manufacturers. Talk about look around at who's having success with what chassis. Brian Finch is really starting to move out with a lot of trucks that are doing really well. Rob McGregor from No Limit Engineering has had a lot of really fast trucks out for a long time. There's a lot of success there. So there's manufacturers that are doing big things. Talk to their dealers. Talk to shops like me that deal in No Limit. Talk to lots of dealers. Ask all these questions like, hey, what have you had good luck with? What have you had to upgrade? What have you had to, what's the learning curve that I'm going to walk, and what should I know now before it's too late?
That you said, what have you had good luck with? And I've done it. I've bought parts that somebody else has used, where you don't hear any negative feedback. And I understand that, because you don't want to bash a company. And just because it didn't work for me doesn't necessarily mean that I'm bad mouthing them. But how talking to you about it and your experience is about the only way that I'm going to find out what you have tried and didn't work, and why you use what you use now. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. I mean, it's not just because this guy does it and is fast, or I saw it on his Instagram, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for me in my situation.
Yep. So what's been a good partnership with me has been Rob with No Limit Engineering. So he builds something fantastic, and then now we've built a bunch of trucks off that platform, and he's been really open to feedback. Like, hey, these bushings have failed fairly quickly. Immediately there's a replacement that's better. So that's an awesome check and balance, right? So he's building a product, and there's people just nonstop building trucks and reporting back, and upgrades are put in place, so I think that is invaluable. And not to say that anybody else is not doing that, but look at the history of who's using and how that manufacturer is progressing with that information. I don't know if I answered your question or not. I've said a bunch of stuff.
You did. Like I said, it's nobody wants to say anything bad about anyone. So the easiest, from my experience, the easiest way is to, before I buy something just because you bought it, talk to you about how it performed. Did you like it? Did you switch? Why did you switch? Your last video talked a lot about why you chose the components that you did. And that was something that I didn't know about.
And the end user has an expectation, and the manufacturer needs to know that expectation, and you need to communicate that expectation too.
True.
So for instance, Brian Finch is putting a lot of chassis together, and I don't know anything about him. There's not a website. Well, I do know a little bit now, but previously I didn't know much about him. There's no website. It's hard to communicate with Brian.
Sure.
That's a con of trying to get a hold of one of those chassis. And some of the questions that I asked Brian was, what's base price? What comes with it? Base price was a certain level, and it didn't come with brakes, it didn't come with shocks, and it doesn't come with any plumbing. So if you're the end user and you're capable of doing the plumbing, you can do that, right? But if you expect it to come, ready to put the body on, you know what I mean? Like, and that's not the case, and you don't know that.
And that's something to be aware of when you're looking at this stuff. You can open up any magazine, and there's a half a dozen chassis companies in there. Mm-hmm. And that's myself included. That's what you kind of look at, is when they're talking about $9,999, and then you compare another company for $15,000. But it's not all black and white what comes with the kit and what doesn't. But I know a lot of that stuff can be specialized for what I'm going to do, or what particular brand that I need, or what you recommend for the purpose of the truck. Is that right?
I don't understand the question.
You can see the really cheap advertisements.
Oh yeah.
But then when you say I need $20,000 to put one together, there's a big difference between what I'm seeing in the magazine versus what your end product is like.
Yeah, and the worst in the industry, in my opinion, has been Roadster Shop advertising the spec chassis when they first started selling the C10 spec chassis, it was $9,999.
Right.
All these people reached out and tried to get all these chassis, and then you don't get any sway bars, you don't get a third mirror, you had to add all these little pieces in, and then by the time you got your quote, it's a bunch of money. You're like, oh, geez, I don't understand. So it's like the clickbait of selling chassis. But they're all going to do that. There's all many different levels of option, and I understand why that's there. But if you've got a budget of $20,000 or $22,000 to do this, you got them all.
Pretty much get whatever you want.
They're all killer. Yeah. So there's things that I like to start with, and then there's things that if you're on a tighter budget, you would have to start with, and then maybe make those upgrades later on in the future.
Okay.
There's a lot of brake package options, that start at a small single piston caliper and then go all the way up to 14-inch 6-piston caliper.
And that's all determined by what you're going to do with the truck. My truck doesn't have huge brakes on it.
No,
I don't road course.
No,
I just do.
No, you're not. Nope.
I'm out there for 30 seconds to 60 seconds, hopefully.
Yep. But what I try to do with my customers is I try to say, hey, listen, a 14-inch 6-piston front and a 12.88 rear 4-piston is like the standard. Like, you need to start there. You don't need to take all these brakes off in a year and a half from now to buy a bunch more stuff. You know what I mean? Let's just start where we know you're going to have good luck with. You can change pad compounds later if you want to do that. But we don't have to take all this stuff off your truck and try to sell it.
That's something that I didn't know either. Street pads versus race pads. And for somebody just getting into it, there's a lot of variables and a lot of questions that go into one of these trucks and what the end result is going to be.
So you and I talked about shocks recently. Shocks is the other thing that there's a big price break, and if you're just starting out building a pickup truck, you don't need to spend all the money on a triple adjustable remote reservoir shock. Get a single adjustable Ride Tech or a double adjustable Viking, and build your driving skill set, and then learn how to just adjust rebound and understand how rebound control works and that dynamic. And then later on, you can incorporate high speed and low speed compression and all those other things. So that's something to maybe save a little bit of money on right now.
Okay.
Powder coat. I don't buy powder coat from anybody. I like to build the entire truck, mock it all up. If you're going to have to drill a hole or tap a hole or mount a bracket or something, it's my preference to just not pay for the powder coat. If you wanted to paint the frames at home, you could paint the frames at home. There's plenty of powder coaters in the country. Once you've confirmed fitment, put everything where you want to, yank it back apart real quick, have the frame powder coated. You'll have a better put together vehicle in the long run, in my opinion.
So you can get these things at different levels. I could buy a complete chassis, but it not be assembled.
Yeah, you could not buy powder coat. You could not buy brake plumbing if you wanted to do it yourself.
Right.
There's a lot of things that you don't have to buy if you don't necessarily want to.
Okay.
Commonly what we do is we like to do all the plumbing ourselves. So if you were a customer and you came to us and said, I'd like your help, put me together something that's a rolling chassis that I can put my body on. What we do is we buy a chassis that's not powder coated. We put all the brakes on it. We build the flex lines for the brake hoses.
Okay.
We can wire a pigtail for the fuel tank, so you just literally plug in your fuel tank. We can metal finish and DA the frame, make it nice before it gets powder coated. So there's a lot of different things in buying a chassis that
lots of communication, right?
Absolutely.
Because it is a lot of money to just write a check to somebody and then not talk to them until it's over. But if it's going to be specialized for you, then that's where you come in. And the deviations of your brakes and your shocks and all that is, God, this part, I messed that up. I forgot my train of thought, man.
Sean will just cut it out.
Your face looks better.
Good.
You're still blinking real slow, but
I'm a blinker, man. I can't help it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's a lot and slow. I don't know.
Still?
Yeah, I mean, your mouth looks...
I'm trying to keep my mouth open so I don't have the sad clown thing going on. Are you serious?
I told... What is that?
critics in the background.
Yeah, I thought that was going really good.
It is going.
I know.
Well, put yourself in that situation.
Right. Well, that's exactly what I'm talking
Like
about.
if you were genuinely going to buy a chassis right now.
When I look in the magazine and it says 10 grand, and you tell me I need $20,000, I want to know where the other 10 grand's at.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what a lot of people are going to want to know too, because that's why I didn't buy one in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
If I'd have thought that I was going to end up with $25,000 for the stuff and a shitty chassis at the end,
Yeah.
I probably would have just held off a year and did it and raced what I had.
I thought the same thing about No Limit. Like when you look at their wide ride kit on the front, you can get that for like 45 or 5 grand, and then you add on shocks and brakes and everything else.
Yeah.
It bumps up to 65 to 7, which I didn't know.
You
But
know,
it's
once you're
totally
at
worth it.
5, 7 is not so far away.
That's what I said though.
Well, that's
looking
what
at their
I know.
website.
If I'm gonna spend
like,
10, might as well spend 15.
It's,
You know.
but that's
different,
50. That's 50%
Yeah.
more. There's just such a price jump, man. And like I said, $20,000 is a lot of money to a lot of people. So, but it's not impossible. I mean,
Yep.
you go out there, man, and there's 50 other dudes with better stuff than you have.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, okay, well, maybe I'm just being cheap.
Yeah.
Mom's leaving.
She's leaving?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You guys got to stay here with me.
Bye,
Yeah.
Sean.
We'll hang out right here, okay? I'm doing a video.
But where the money's going.
Okay.
That's what I try to hit on, man.
Okay.
As far as like, okay, brakes, big brakes, no brakes. Am I getting top shelf?
Okay.
The shock thing, I know there's a big variable in the prices.
Okay.
Um,
All right. So,
and especially if I don't know anything about it. If I know, I'm just listening to whatever you're telling me. And
Okay.
you're like, hey, this is the best.
Okay.
Okay, well, I called you. I believe you. And then
All
you
right.
go somewhere else, and this guy's running Vikings, but this guy's got JRI. But this guy has Ride Tech, and he's killing me.
Mm-hmm.
But what I don't know is that this guy's been driving for 10 years in the same truck.
absolutely.
But having all the right parts isn't going to necessarily make me fast. But at least if I've got all the right stuff, I can just worry about me driving.
Okay. So, I'm going to loop back around. And so we just had a little bit of like conversation within this whole conversation about like, are we really giving you the information that we need to? One of the big things is cost, right? So
Yeah.
let's just get down to it. So I'm selling a lot of chassis right now for $22,000. And if you go to No Limit's website, or you go to somebody's website and you start out at $12,950, let's talk about where all the rest of that money goes.
Sure.
So when you start out, they might have a default caliper in the front as a single piston 12-inch brake, which is totally fine if you're going to drive to America's Drive-In Sonic and get a drink. But like if you're really wanting to do, if you're the customer that we're trying to talk about right now, which is the guy that wants to drive 10,000 miles a year and autocross, so you're gonna pay $4,000 for nice brakes. Another thing is getting all the plumbing done, all the brake lines and fuel lines and all that stuff. There's a little bit of cost that goes into that. A lot of times we spend another $500 or $600 on a better steering rack than the standard steering rack. We spend a little bit more money on Delrin bushings and control arms versus urethane bushings and control arms. Powder coat, third member, and then we do a 99.9% of the time now we're doing floater rear ends. So that means it's got a full float rear axle.
Okay, what's the benefit to that?
No pad knockback is the biggest part. So a lot of trucks have a 62-inch wide rear end, but then they want a 12.5-inch wide wheel, and the back space is 5 inches.
Okay.
There's a lot of wheel and tire that can flex the end of the axle shaft. Axle shaft has a rotor bolted to it. The rotor can push the brake pads back and push.
I didn't even know what
pistons
pad
back.
knockback was until I was complaining about my brake pedal.
Yeah, so it's a real thing. Even the guys that run around on the street can experience pad knockback with a low offset wide wheel on a standard 9-inch rear end. You can get a tapered roller bearing on a standard Torino end 9-inch and try to combat that, but it's still going to be a thing when you're autocrossing and road racing. So, we do a full float rear end. So it's got a larger bearing in a hub where the rotor's not connected to it,
Okay.
and the axle's not connected to the hub. So there's no pad knockback.
So there's cost to it, but it's eliminating an issue that you're going to experience later.
Yeah, so the floater rear end, the bushings, there's like a few things that we say, hey, listen, you need to just spend the money on this now so that you don't have to go through having these issues and then going back to fix them later on in the future, right? So
yeah, and I'm the opposite. I mean, you bought what you needed the first time, while I've spent a couple $1,000 on a 12 bolt that is still just a stock 12 bolt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've got a good
same thing. You got
center
D52 calipers on a
and I've
standard
spent all the
12
money,
bolt. Mm-hmm.
but I've still got.
If we could
desirable
go
rear
back
end.
in time, like Ross, and I could sell him a 9-inch with
Yeah.
the stuff that he needed, like
it'd be over.
yeah, it'd be over. So, anyways, that's what we're trying to get to now is the fact that do a little bit of research, read about what you really need, and things that you're not going to have to replace in the future. So know the use, know what you're really going to do with the truck, and then talk to somebody that can help you figure out the options that you really need to pay for right now.
And that's the hard part, man, is everybody that I talk to, it's been super helpful, but at the same time, most of them run different stuff.
Yeah.
And they've all got different opinions about it. Like, yes, this worked for me up until this point. And like, well, I don't like that, but I like this.
Yeah.
And it's hard to decide which path you want to follow when everybody's running different. But there are some constants.
Yeah, and that's just such a thing that is tough. You think that I'm just gonna put a 4-link on my 12 bolt and go out there and do this stuff, and then you do it and you have issues, and all of a sudden you look around and you're like, oh well, all these dudes have floaters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so there's a thing. I don't know. There's like 7 other things that ever happened to me. It's like you try something, you look around and you're like, oh well, crap. Everybody else is doing that.
Yeah.
They've already figured this out.
Yeah.
So hopefully this video and some of these videos in this series are going to help direct some of you guys to answers to questions that you might have throughout the process of building a pickup.
And you're available like 24 hours a day for stuff
Oh,
like
absolutely.
this, right?
Text me, whatever you want.
You're going to put your phone number on here. The Jesse Vaughn.
No, but if you guys have any questions pertaining to chassis, what options you'd need in purchasing a chassis, I am more than happy to help. I just ask that you email me at jesse@level7motorsports.com. That's probably the most convenient way for me to efficiently answer a question for you. Or you can get a hold of Keith at...
And I can give you Jesse's number.
859.
No, super helpful guy. You help me out a little bit from time to time.
Man, I'm just trying to be the middleman. I'm just trying to help be a point of contact to help with some of these purchases. Help guide guys into a better spot than the path that I took.
There's a lot of information out there, man, and not all of it is accurate.
Yeah,
As
that's
far
true,
as
and I'm
being
not saying that
online,
I have.
Everybody has great reviews,
Yeah, that's true.
but what it's easy to overlook is the bad reviews, on parts and situations and stuff like that. But the easiest thing for me has been to just talk to the people that have it.
Yeah, and I think that the Protouring truck community is, bar none, like some of the best to be open about, what they've done.
This works and this didn't.
Yeah, don't do that. That's dumb.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks for watching. Please post some comments. Subscribe to this. Subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. Comment, do all those things that I don't really know. But thanks for watching. See you next time.